today on the First Time Storytelling broadcast, my guest is Sahera
Sahara, yeah, it's
Sahera
fine.
Chohan. Sarah is an author, speaker, leadership coach, and former BBC broadcaster. She's currently writing a book on losing her mate to suicide. Sahera is here to share the story of the first time republishing her late husband's book, 2020, a novel that predicted the global pandemic. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thanks, Anne. Good to be here.
All right. Well, I cannot wait to hear this story and find out more about your late husband's book, 2020. So, if you can go ahead and frame the story for us, tell us a little bit what inspired your husband to write the book, and then what inspired you to go ahead and republish it.
Sure, definitely. Well, it's tricky, isn't it? Because I'm not in his shoes, so I don't know all the elements that inspired him. But I do know that he was very passionate about giving a message to people and a message to basically help people wake up to reality of what we're living in. So he was very concerned around environmental issues. So a large part of the book talks about climate change, but bear in mind, he wrote this book in 1995. So he wrote it 25 years ago. And, 25 years ago, certainly I wasn't as aware of environmental issues as I am today. And so part of that drove him. But the strangest thing is that it predicts a global pandemic, amongst other things. And it also predicts a world where we're all communicating virtually, which we're doing. It predicts
And that didn't exist 25 years ago.
No. So, there are references in the book to things like, virtual communications, virtual tourism, which I'll talk about a bit later on. So because air travel is curtailed due to the virus, the global virus, that's, absolutely what's happening now. There are references to furlough, to sat nav, to electric cars, to fingerprint ID. I mean, there's so much in the book that how he knew about that, I absolutely don't know. And I've been asked about, how did he know with such accuracy? Bearing in mind, he wasn't a scientist, he was a novelist. And I often say that I do believe as writers, we have to plumb the depths of, what is beyond our conscious awareness, if that makes sense. And I know in my own experience of writing that when I sit down and start typing, I know it's not just me who's doing it, if that doesn't sound too weird. Like, it's almost like I'm channeling something. And stuff just comes out and I'm like, oh my goodness, where did that come from? And usually it's much better than I would have produced on my own. And so he, I'm sure, kind of connected to something when he was writing that somehow enabled him to come up with this story that has now 25 years become a reality. Yeah.
And he called the book 2020.
And he called the book 2020. So it's set in the year 2020. I mean, I was thinking about it again this morning because, I republished this book back in August of this year because obviously it had to be published again. And then I can talk about, the process of that. But I was thinking about it again and I'm still blown away about the fact that how did he know? Like, he wrote this in 1993 as part of his PhD. It was published in 1995. And he, he could have set it in 2012, which was another sort of year, wasn't it, when the world was meant to kind of collapse in on itself. He could have chosen any year, but he chose 2020. And sure enough, 2020 is the year when we're going through what he talked about in the book. So yeah, it's kind of strange.
It's freaky, but I completely agree with what there is something about authors, and when you write, your characters take you places, different things happen that you like, this isn't me, where is this coming from? And they actually say that tech companies hire sci-fi writers, right, to get into their imagination, what they're imagining the future holds, because now we can actually go into our imagination and work towards making that happen. So the sooner we can invent, create, we do so. So that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So now let's get to your story and what, because I can only imagine, like, when did you decide, whoa, this is freaky, this is happening, and then what happened from there?
Yeah. So I basically was walking with a friend just before Christmas. We were walking in a local park, and we were just chatting about, the turn of the year, and we're coming into 2020, and wow, what a, significant year it is. Well, I mean, who would have known that it's as significant as it is? And we were talking about, what do we want to do in the new year, etc. And I said one of the things I really wanted to do was to reread Nigel's book 2020, because he'd obviously written this novel called 2020. And when I talked to her, I bear in mind I hadn't read this book for 25 years, so I had not remembered all the detail of, all the kind of events that he talks about, including the pandemic. And of course, when we were walking in the park in December, there was no pandemic. So there was nothing to trigger my mind to go, oh my gosh, he wrote about the pandemic. And so 2020 came, and, COVID came. And so then I had not pulled the book down off the bookshelf yet. And then I was having a conversation with his nephew, who said, read The Dust Jacket. You've got to read. And I was like, oh my God, of course. I said I would read 2020. So I pulled, the book down, and I read The Dust Jacket. And it was, all about an author contracts a virus. He escapes to the northern wastes of Canada. Meanwhile, this virtual reality test pilot, William, and this anthropologist, Julia, have their own parallel story. I mean, there are many layers in this book, actually. And so I'm reading it, and I'm going, oh my goodness, a global pandemic, a virus, virtual communications. So of course, immediately I start reading it. And the first thing I thought when I was reading it was, wow, this would make an amazing movie. And he actually, in his PhD, wrote that he wrote the book as a movie. And so I then started to get on the phone to some people I know who are connected, who work in, film. And long story short, that's phase 2. So phase 1 was actually, you need to really republish this book. And I got in touch with his agents, his literary agents, and his publishers. And basically, there was a publisher that was interested in publishing it, but they couldn't publish it until next year, 2021. I was like, no, it's 2020. It needs to be it needs to be published in 2020. And then I met with a friend, and her son, Arthur, he was really encouraging of getting this book published. He was really kind of, wow, this is incredible. Let's do it. So we did it, and we self-published it on Amazon. And this is the product, 2020 by Nigel Watts. And you can see that the main character there is wearing a mask, obviously. And it's attracted a lot of interest, actually, purely because of how sort of prescient it is. And I'm very proud of it. It was not an easy task. It was really, there was no digital version. So we had to get the original book digitized. And when it came back in a Word doc, there were like a million mistakes. I mean, probably not a million, but there were a lot of mistakes. And I had to go through it. Like, I had to proofread at least 4 times. And I really got inside Nigel's head, and there were sections of the book that I had to rewrite because the text was you know, all skewed all over the page. And it was a really strange sensation to rewrite his words. And I talk about this in the foreword and say, you know, actually, when I was writing the foreword, you know, I had to write the foreword, about the author. There were lots of things I had to do in terms of the republication. And writing the foreword, I really, at the beginning, felt I struggled with it. It was hard.
Mm.
And actually, there was a point when I just said, help me out, to him, you know, like, help me out. And something just kind of flowed out of me again. And it was like, I share, it's like he was in the room with me. And I think he'd be delighted that his book is out in the world again. Yeah, one of his books, because he wrote several novels, published several novels, but this one, I think, you know, yeah.
Yeah. So because as you are doing that, right, and I would say it's emotional on a lot of level because you've lost your husband to suicide. How long ago was that?
20 years.
20 years. So
Yeah.
there's, and the topic is so heavy. And then is it a mixture of why didn't we not prevent this? Like if he saw it, why didn't other people didn't see it? And like, are you like digging more to the news? Like what is all what are all the emotions and the thoughts that you're going through?
Oh my goodness. I mean, when I was reading the book, it was actually it was painful at times. And particularly because the book is semi-autobiographical. So the main character is known as the author, and the author is the one that contracts the virus. And he leaves his wife to go and basically die. So he leaves his wife, goes to Canada, so they're living in Canada. And weirdly, in the book, the author is 63, and Nigel would have been 63 in the year 2020. And his wife is called Carla, and she's an Asian TV presenter in the book with a diamond stud in her nose, which I've still got. And you know, we have two sons in his story, and of course we didn't have children because Nigel died just before we were planning to have children. And so reading, I talk about this in the foreword again, it's like reading about our lives, or what would have been our lives had he not took his life, was actually really hard. And there are references in the book where he talks about Carla would be fine with me leaving, she wouldn't want me around. And you know, I found myself reading it going, that's not true, Nigel. I wasn't fine, you know, I wasn't fine. And of course I wasn't fine when he committed. I mean, you know, how can anyone be fine when their beloved takes their life? I mean, it was the most devastating experience ever. And there's no end point of the process. You know, grief does not finish. It's not finite. It changes form. And, you know, there are times when even 20 years on, I will still feel that deep kind of searing pain of missing him, yearning him, grieving him, that I did, you know, weeks after he died. You know, it does, in my experience, it doesn't necessarily lessen, but that happens less frequently. And so, yeah, I mean, I write about that in the book I'm writing about, actually what it's, you know, my own experience of losing a love to suicide, and how I don't like to say how I've got through it, because you don't get through it, but how I walk it, you know, because it is a path. It's a path.
So as you're getting clearer understanding of your husband in his way of thinking through the book, are you feeling the heaviness of like what he was seeing as a future, and maybe an understanding of not wanting to like face that future?
Do you know, I do feel fear about it. I've got to be honest, you know. I mean, his book is quite dystopian. In fact, it was compared in one of the earlier reviews by one of the national newspapers here as a sort of George Orwell of our times, you know, a 1984. And even though 1984 was actually, you know, more sort of more dystopian, there are so many accurate references in Nigel's book, and I look around and I go, wow, you know, I do feel really obviously concerned is not even the right word, fearful actually of what's going to happen and how we're going to cope with this. And actually the Kogi, who are the Amazonian tribe that Nigel writes about in the book, so they are an actual Amazonian tribe who do exist, and I talk about them quite a lot when I'm, you know, talking about the book, because they form such a central part. And they are, they call themselves elder brother, and they call us younger brother. And they were brought to prominence in 1990 by a filmmaker called Alan Herrera. And they wanted to pass a message on to younger brother, to us, to say that if you carry on treating the planet in the way that you're treating her, that, you know, the planet will get increasingly sicker, and you will get sick as well. They talk about, you know, younger brother will have many illnesses if they treat the planet the way they treat it. And, you know, here we are. They released another film in 2012, actually Alan Herrera did, called A Luna, because they said, look, a younger brother hasn't listened to our message, and so we need to come and warn again of what's happening, the devastating consequences of destroying our habitat, our planet, our seas, our land. And you know, because it impacts us, of course it does, we're connected. And actually, you know, there's a beautiful quote that Nigel talks about in his PhD, which refers to the fact that if we consider ourselves as separate from the planet and from each other, then, you know, actual sort of catastrophes can happen. But if we see ourselves as connected, you know, like a leaf on a tree, then we will have the respect that we need to, you know, respect the mother that the Kogi say supports us in our lives, you know. So yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so I agree so 110% fully with all of that. And it's just, it's a heaviness, I think, that many of us are carrying, because we do see, and, you know, the more I research technology in the future, the more sometimes I have to stop, because, you know, there's a lot of you know, there's a lot of forks in the roads, but right now we keep kind of making the wrong turns, and it doesn't seem to be anything that's shifting it. So even everything that's happening with the COVID, the conversation about the correlation between us getting sick and what we're doing to Mother Earth, you know, we're not talking about it. You know, we're talking about the solution is the vaccine, right? So we always create a solution, and then we avoid what the actual problem is, and
Right,
then
exactly.
we're just doomed to keep. And you know, I know within my own life, every time I actually avoided what the real problem was, things just constantly got worse until I decided to address it. And when you're thinking about a world population having to do that, it's, you know, it's extremely intense to think about. And yeah. So
yeah, that's fine. One of my teachers actually said, used to say that if you don't heed the message the first time, the message gets bigger and it gets louder. And if you don't heed it the second time, it gets even bigger and even louder. And I do think, you know, as you say, I mean, you know, one avenue is, okay, what can we do to sort of stop this, you know, i.e. the solution being a vaccine. And without, I mean, obviously we all have different opinions about that, and I'm not going to get into that, but the truth is that this is a wake-up call. And actually Nigel's book, you know, his driver, I do believe, like I said at the beginning of this interview, is that he wanted to shake people awake to what they're doing. And so yeah, kind of, that is what's happening right now.
Yeah. So I apologize. So now that the book has been republished and self-published and it's out there, have people been reading it, leaving reviews, or
Yeah.
is it being that, the a change catalyst that your husband, had intended the whole time, albeit 25 years later?
I don't know about a change catalyst in terms of kind of in the wider world, but I do know from friends of mine who are reading it going, oh my goodness, this really fried my brain. Oh my goodness, this really made me think. Someone sent me a text message yesterday and said, it really was out of my comfort zone, as in it really does kind of make you question, because I said earlier, there are so many layers in this book. So there's the story of, the whole kind of global pandemic plot. There's the characters, William and Julia, who discover that their lives have been written about in paperback books that Julia discovers. There's the quest to find the author, because they realize that this author has written about them in previous books. And actually, Julia is the offspring of his first novel, The Life Game, and William is the offspring of his third novel, We All Live in a House Called Innocence. And so then the whole question of, well, do we really exist comes up, and what's the nature of identity? So there's a lot of kind of metaphysical stuff in the book as well. And, is it this reality or is it a different reality that we're in? Is the author writing our story as we're trying to find him or not? There's just all of that in the book. And then there's this whole piece around the Omnisens, which is the research facility for the virtual reality program that William and Julia are working on. And the virtual reality program is a virtual tourism package, if you like, into the Amazon to visit the Kogi who educate William and Julia. So there's so many elements in this. I mean, you have to read it.
Yeah.
Everybody has to read it,
Clearly.
because there's so many messages in it, and people take different things from it, kind of depending on
where they're
at.
yeah.
You know
And
what I mean?
those are very powerful. There are not a lot of books that, depending on where you're at in life, you take away a message and then you can reread it, take away an entirely different message because of the framing and the mindset that you're in at the time.
Right.
And so, I mean, I can absolutely see where it was not an option for you to republish this, get it out, spread the word about it. And then, yeah, I suppose in the end, then it's in people's hands to decide what to do with it. So with all that being said, how do people get the book?
So they go onto Amazon. Everybody knows how to go onto Amazon, and it's available globally. So you can get it in the US and obviously in the UK and sort of other parts of Europe, etc. And you just type in 2020 the words by Nigel Watts, Watts. And make sure you get this copy and not the old copy, because Amazon also hold the older version, but they're like really expensive for some reason because there's so few of them. So make sure you get the paperback, or you can get it on Kindle as well. Yeah, it's quite a read, as I said. And you asked about reviews. We've got lots of reviews on Amazon so far. So yeah, all really favorable, which is fabulous. So
yeah. I mean, I'm gonna go check out the book and buy the book, and I'm gonna read the reviews, because the curiosity of how people are handling what you're describing to be such a layered story, with the fact of the situation that we're in right now, like how people, like I said, mind blown, how are they grasping that it was, your husband was able to predict this 25 years ago, and saw it played out. And it was not just protecting, and perhaps, you can say, okay, the pandemic, yes, but the technology and, what we're employing now, that those are some crazy
Yeah.
leaps. And
Well, and you know, we haven't sort of specifically, I haven't read any references, but I mean, I just, there's a reference to masks, which, you know, because obviously masks are a big thing. Can I just read
yeah, go for
one, you
it.
know, he says, so this is on page 167. Though the air monitors on the poles were silent, there were few people on the streets, and most of those were wearing masks. 3 months out of circulation, and William noticed the difference. Had things really gotten so bad? Necessity was apparently becoming a virtue, face masks becoming increasingly fashionable, animal shapes, fluorescent patterns, tiny gold and black face pads. Some people wore full helmets, antennae rising from their ears like comic book Martians. You know, I mean, it's, and also he talks about the states, the US being the worst hit, particularly Washington, D.C. and New York,
Oh, wow.
which is true. And he said he had heard rumors that giant lime pits had been dug outside D.C. and New York to deal with the mounting number of plague deaths. Well, you know, they were digging mass graves in New York a few months ago when, you know, around sort of April, May, I saw on the news. And so, yeah, there's a lot there that is kind of strange.
Yeah. I have to laugh because I'm totally getting the book, and if you're listening, watching, you need to get this book and
Thank you.
wake up to the reality, and that it's not just about, everybody's like, things are going to go back to normal next, there's going to be and I've caught myself saying that there's going to be a vaccine and things are going to go back to normal in 2021. And the bottom line is they can't go back to normal. Like, we cannot continue on the path that we are on. I mean, we couldn't do it 10, 15 years ago. We couldn't do it 20, 25 years ago. We can't do it today. So, and there's so many things to distract us. There's so many things to keep us from, the reality, but we have to face the reality. And clearly your husband was facing that reality a very long time ago. And and again, I can't imagine how much that would weigh on someone, because if you write something like that, it's because you live it when you write it. I mean, you truly do live it. And
Yeah.
that's heavy stuff.
Well, yeah, and in the book, the author, because he uses the author for his voice, obviously, except, given that it was semi-autobiographical, and he talks about being really fed up with the human race, with civilization, just with what we're doing, and he, yeah, I mean, that he expressed that very, very clearly in the book as well, through the author. Who's just like thrown his hands up in the air with the world and gone, do you know what, you can keep it, I'm off, and yeah, that sort of, I guess, that parallel of, Nigel, he had his own reasons for taking his life, it wasn't just about the world, but truthfully, he found the world a very difficult place to exist in. He was an incredibly sensitive man, and he found it very painful to be here,
Yeah. And that, and that can be tough to understand, because people that have that kind of struggle do put up a big front. I don't know if your husband did that or not. They'll be strong for other people, but
Yeah.
what they're internally battling is deep.
Yeah.
And then writing is one way of expressing it. So at least he was able to express it and get it out. But just because you get it out doesn't mean that you truly can, see a way past it. And, I know for me, I have to look at, it helps look at future generation and their inspiration, and, what they're working on and what they're envisioning, and what their, with their hopes and dreams. 'Cause the news does not present that. And, there are amazing entrepreneurial folks out there of, all generation, all ages, working on very different things. But when you look at the whole of humanity, it's a huge struggle. I mean, that's why, like, literally my business is to raise human potential, is to break those loops, to get people to wake up, to provide them the technology and the tools that allow them to do that. Because, the self-help industry hasn't really, they haven't good intentions, but they haven't changed
Yeah.
anything in, decades, if not centuries. So, it has to be action driven. And we have so much more science behind it with, what neuroscientists have provided us that we can leverage to change the way that we behave and,
Mm.
elevate who we are as human beings. Because if we don't do that, we don't survive. We don't make
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Because
I'm
it can't.
totally with you. I'm totally
Yeah.
with you on that. And I think something you said earlier as well around kind of leaning into the reality rather than denying it. It's like, la, 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 I'm just going to get on with my life and everything's going to be back to normal and da, da, da. No, it's like, even though the reality is really painful to lean into and really scary, actually, it's more scary if we don't, because at least if we lean into it, then there's more of a chance we can impact it.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do it on our own. It's like we don't have to do this on our own. Yeah,
Yeah, it
I
should be
really
something that
agree.
unites us. I mean, if it should be such a massive uniting factor. And, but there are so many voices that are divisive right now. It's just like they have to be quieted down, and certain other voices need to raise to the surface. And, for me, I don't have any kids, and it was a personal decision not to have any kids. And it shifted to, if I had a child, I don't even know how I would cope.
Mm,
Because, like, for me, it ends with me. Like, I have nieces and nephew, and I owe them. And like I said, I owe future generations. But if I had a no kidding my own child, I would just be a mad woman, strangling
mm,
people for not, because it's just like, we have to, for their survival. I
mm.
just can't imagine what the future is going to be like, and what, they're going to have to go through, and the fact that we're not at all setting them up for success.
No,
um
but then think about it in the other respect, which is that, Greta Thunberg really catalyzed a massive global protest amongst school children, in late 2019 around,
yeah.
climate change, climate protests. And weirdly, actually, again, there's another reference in Nigel's book about how the children actually are the ones that can not save us, but they're the ones that know. And I'm trying to find it from my notes. But where is it? Anyway, there's a quote in the book that talks about it's the children that will, really help to stop what's happening. And they are our future. I've found it. It's on page 233. He says, our generation knew our cleverness would be our undoing, but we thought the end would come quickly, apocalyptically, but we were wrong. It was our children born into the 21st century who could truly see it was not a bullet to our heads that would kill us, but the seeping of poison into our bloodstreams. It is too late now. We have almost killed the mother, just as the coggy foresaw. We are killing her with our ignorance and ugliness, just as we killed the coggy. Well, so he thought that we'd kill off the coggy. Thank goodness, right now the coggy are still, with us. But that's what he talks about. He talks about it's the children that could really, move things forward, and that kind of happened, didn't it? And it's
Yeah.
still happening, and that's who we have to, support to and empower them to realize they do have power and they can change things.
Yeah, it's absolutely our responsibility to them. And, you get to the point, it's no longer, you've done what you're going to do with your life. Now, you do have this massive responsibility to others. And,
Yeah.
the way that this pandemic, and especially here in the United States, the disregards for elders, because it's not built in, where there's knowledge, there's so much that is lost when you lose that, and then you're doomed to repeat because the knowledge is not passed on, right?
Right.
And then you become so much, the passing of knowledge allows somebody to be proactive.
Mhm.
When you lack the passing of knowledge, then you still create a reactive movement or active force to what's happening right now, potentially the future. And we're not, versus again being the which is why like storytelling is so important, because it is,
Mm.
it stays embedded in us through storytelling. And I do want to get all generations to share their stories to get that understanding. And it's the human experience that we need to connect around, embrace, and want to continue on, and it's going to shift and change, but it needs to be grounded somewhere. Again, with all the changes that are coming with technology, if we don't ground the human experience, it it has the potential of going away, because if we lose our consciousness of what it means to be human, and that's the danger of the future generations. And then what does it look like?
Exactly.
I will not be
Exactly.
around for it. But if I were writing a book, that's the stuff I would be. I
Got to
would be.
use our voices
I
in
would
whatever
be.
way we can. Yeah.
I would be focusing on. All right. Well, this has been a deep, amazing conversation. So
Oh,
let's get to something a little lighter.
okay. Let's do it.
let's
Some
let's
levity.
play the first time at lightning round. All right. So the way it works is I'm going to ask Sarira 10 different first time options. If it's something she's done before, she's going to say up. So swipe up, similar to if she was on the 365 First Challenge app. Something never done, not interested, then it's left. Something never done, would like to do, add to your list, then it's right. Ready?
Great. Okay. All right.
Okay, first one, take a kickboxing class.
That's left.
That's a left. Never done it, not interested.
Right. I mean,
Okay.
left.
Left. Learn, or if you learn or dance the tango.
Oh, that's
Right.
right.
I would give that a try. Do origami. Oh, that's a left. Not interested in
Not really.
origami.
No.
Okay. Go fishing.
Hmm.
That is a right. We're adding go fishing to the list. What kind of fishing would you like to do? Would you like deep
Trout
sea
fishing.
fishing, trout fishing?
I don't know
All
why
right.
I said that, but yeah, sounded good. Trout fishing.
Trout fishing. Fabulous. Okay. Attend an improv class.
A what? Oh. And
Oh,
I love it.
she's done that before. What was your
Love it.
first improv class like?
It was amazing. It was so much fun. We just laughed the whole time. I loved it.
Yeah. What did you learn? What was your takeaway from it, other than it's a lot of fun?
You know, that the whole kind of basis of yes and. So rather than trying to change a scene, you go in and you build on it. And I really like that, because it basically it's very collaborative.
Yeah.
It's like I accept what you're doing and I'm going to add to it, rather than I don't like what you're doing, so I'm going to change it.
Yeah,
So,
that
yeah,
was
I really like
my that was my biggest like takeaway from my first improv class was this is really about teamwork and communication.
Yeah.
And it's not so much about comedy. I mean, you get into that, but it's really about learning to communicate with people. And I was like, this is very interesting. And you do so many different exercises. It's not
Yeah.
even just verbally communicating, but through facial expressions and,
Yeah.
and different things. Yeah, it's a
Great.
really
Yeah.
great.
Mhm.
I think everyone should do multiple improv classes.
I agree.
Okay. In the spirit of it being towards the end of October, how about go to our haunted house?
Oh, no. I'm too scared.
Really?
I
Never
can't,
been to one and not interested.
seriously, I hate horror movies. I hate anything that scares me. No, I avoid all that stuff.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Hmm. Okay.
Clearly you don't.
I I honestly have not been in a haunted house where I was actually like scared, because although in Germany I went to the Frankenstein, I forget where it was, but in Germany they can, so in the US it's very strict. Like you can't touch people, you can't,
Yeah.
lawsuits and all that good stuff. In
Yeah.
Germany, that goes out the window. They can touch you, they can grab you,
My
they
goodness.
can lock you up and whatever they want. And so that added a
Oh no.
layer of, I mean, this is a little bit more real.
I'm not going to go to Germany again either. No, not if they do that.
All right. Although I think the best haunted anything it was a cornfield, and that is really neat because you're actually outside, and it's just that was
A
very neat.
haunted cornfield.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow. Okay. I can. My
that
mind
was
is not
great
going
fun. And I went with my sisters and my stepmom, and they were scaring each other. So, it was nice. It's like I don't get scared, but it's kind of cool to see how someone can really get into it and like psych themselves out and like
Yeah.
be scared. So I enjoyed that, even
I'm
though it's
glad
like,
you enjoy it.
yeah, it's gotta get you out there with the right group of people.
No thanks.
No thanks. Okay. Next one, use a food processor.
Oh. Um. Oh no. Hang on. Yes. Up. Sorry.
Done
I
that.
just forgot. Yes, I've used a food processor. Not very often, but yes.
Do you remember your first recipe?
Oh my goodness. I think it was with my mom actually, and we were making, she used to use a food processor to make chapatis.
Hmm.
And so I would help her with that. So that was probably one of the first times that I used one. It was a Kenwood Chef, for those of you who are old enough to remember.
Oh yeah. All right. Awesome. Okay, next one. Play ping pong.
Oh, I love ping pong. I love it.
Remember your first time playing ping pong?
Oh God, no. I don't remember the first time, but I know there was a first time, like everything, but I don't remember it.
All right, but it obviously
It
left a
was
good
probably in a
impression.
pub. It was probably in a pub. I still do remember, yeah, kind of, going to pubs and playing ping pong.
Oh, all right. Go to a rock concert.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Oh yeah.
gosh, yeah.
And last one is climb a tree.
I think I did as a kid. So hang on, have
Oh.
done it. Yes, yes, I did as a kid. Not very high, but I know that I've climbed trees.
All right,
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so the final question, I think we touched already a little bit on it, but the final question is, how have you been making the best of the current situation with the pandemic?
Well, I published a book.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually because my work is usually really, really busy, and I travel a lot for my work, and obviously with lockdown, I didn't, and so I really used the time to republish Nigel's book, and also start work again on my book, which I'm currently still working on. So the time has given me that time to to create, actually, which has been amazing. And also to pause. It was so incredible to pause, which I hadn't done for a long time. And things have really ramped up again with my work, but that there was about a month or so when I just, life was really simple. It was a walk, it was yoga, it was cooking, it was just being. And that actually was a real gift for me at that time. So yeah.
Oh, awesome. Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming
Oh,
on and sharing this incredible story.
thank
And
you.
again, everyone needs to get the book. I will get the book. And I think as I'm reading the book, I'm also going to be putting myself in your shoes of just, I can only imagine what an emotional process, it was for you, and this is what's so incredible about everything about this is that there's the layers are seems to be quite endless.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a very good way to put it, actually, Anne. And thank you very much for having me. It's been really good to talk. Thank you.